On December 14, 2023, the International Rescue Committee, IRC, released its annual Emergency Watchlist, identifying the top 10 countries at the highest risk of experiencing or worsening humanitarian crises in 2024. This critical analysis, based on a combination of quantitative and qualitative methods, including insights from field staff, accurately predicted 85–95% of countries with the most severe deteriorations in recent years. The watchlist countries, representing only 10% of the global population, disproportionately account for 86% of those in humanitarian need, 75% of displaced persons, 70% of people facing severe food insecurity, IPC 3 or worse, and an increasing percentage of global extreme poverty. The 2024 Emergency Watchlist highlights the 10 countries most likely to face the gravest humanitarian challenges, with detailed profiles available in the full report. Among these, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, is a prominent case, entering the year with 25.4 million people in need of humanitarian aid, the highest globally. The situation in the DRC has been exacerbated by renewed conflict in the eastern regions, following the collapse of a truce with the armed group M23, along with ongoing political tensions, economic strains, climate shocks, and disease outbreaks. This escalating crisis in the DRC has led to severe food insecurity, forcing families to take drastic measures such as selling belongings or marrying off children to survive. The potential El Niño weather pattern in 2024 threatens to worsen conditions through flooding, spreading waterborne diseases, reducing agricultural yields, and prompting further displacement. The DRC's humanitarian response in 2023 was underfunded, receiving only 38% of the required funding, limiting the reach of aid efforts. In response, the IRC is actively engaged in providing emergency healthcare, shelter, supplies, peace-building, and economic recovery support in eastern Congo. Their initiatives include healthcare training, medical facility rehabilitation, support for sexual assault survivors, reproductive health services, and promoting girls' education. 9. Ethiopia, deepening crises and rising tensions, the 9th top global crisis in 2024. As Ethiopia grapples with severe drought, ongoing conflicts, and the impending threat of El Niño-induced flooding, the nation faces one of its most challenging years in 2024. The northern Tigray conflict, while currently at a ceasefire, is overshadowed by escalating tensions in central Oromia and northwest Amhara, significantly intensifying humanitarian needs and the likelihood of a return to widespread conflict. Adding to the complexity, the Amhara region is experiencing significant internal strife. The people there, largely opposed to the federal government, have effectively overthrown regional government leaders. As a result, governance in the region is virtually non-existent, with approximately 80% of Amhara's districts now controlled by Fano militias. This power vacuum has led to the closure of most schools and universities, deeply affecting the region's social fabric and future prospects. Amhara, known for its historical sites and previously a major tourist destination, has seen a dramatic decline in tourism. The ongoing unrest and lack of governance have led to a steep drop in visitors, with fewer than 100 tourists recorded this year, further damaging the region's economy and cultural exchange opportunities. The overall economic and social impact of these crises is exacerbated by 3 consecutive years of drought and persistent inflation, which has made basic goods unaffordable for many Ethiopians. The prospect of El Niño flooding in 2024 poses an additional threat to already vulnerable communities. In the face of these challenges, the International Rescue Committee, IRC, is deeply committed to supporting Ethiopia. The IRC's multifaceted approach includes rapid emergency response, initiatives in water, sanitation and hygiene, WASH, health and nutrition services, education, protection, and economic recovery. By addressing immediate needs and fostering long-term resilience, the IRC aims to provide crucial support to Ethiopians navigating these complex and interwoven crises. Niger and Somalia, facing political turmoil and climate challenges, the 8th and 7th top global crises in 2024. 8. Niger, political upheaval and humanitarian crisis. Niger, a nation already grappling with challenges, faces a new crisis following the July 2023 coup. This political upheaval has strained relations with neighboring countries, resulting in the withdrawal of international security assistance. Subsequent sanctions and border closures have critically limited the influx of nutritional aid and medical supplies. The country's public spending has plummeted by 40%, leading to a significant weakening of essential services. In 2024, Niger faces daunting prospects. Economic and financial sanctions will likely exacerbate the strain on public services. The power vacuum left by the withdrawal of foreign military assistance could be exploited by armed groups, increasing instability. The country confronts a severe risk of acute food insecurity, affecting 7.3 million people due to climate change, conflict, and the economic impacts of border closures. The IRC's role in Niger is significant, supporting over 270,000 people in 2023 through cash distribution, seed distributions to farmers, support to health centers and schools, water supply infrastructure, and protection programs for women and children. 7. Somalia, drought, flooding, and conflict. Somalia, a country with a history of instability and conflict, faces compounded challenges in 2024. After enduring 5 consecutive failed rainy seasons, Somalia is now dealing with widespread flooding. These extreme climate shocks have ravaged agricultural lands, damaged infrastructure, and escalated humanitarian needs. Entering 2024, 4.3 million people in Somalia are facing crisis levels of food insecurity, with limited capacity to restore food production. The government's ongoing offensive against the militant group Al-Shabaab poses risks of civilian harm and displacement, exacerbating the situation for 6.9 million people in need of humanitarian aid. The coming year poses serious challenges for Somalia. Communities will struggle to recover from the severe drought, while flooding could lead to further displacement and increased risks of crop failures and waterborne diseases. The ongoing conflict with Al-Shabaab, coupled with political tensions, may lead to more violence. Additionally, a lack of humanitarian funding and security risks hinder efforts to reach those in need. The IRC in Somalia is intensifying its efforts, expanding programs to address drought, rising food insecurity, and providing health, nutrition, water, and sanitation services, women's protection and empowerment, and cash assistance across the country. 6. Mali, a country in crisis. In Mali, a West African nation rich in cultural history but plagued by political instability and conflict, 6.2 million people require urgent humanitarian support. The recent withdrawal of the United Nations peacekeeping forces has heightened safety concerns, particularly the risk of renewed fighting between the government and Tuareg armed groups in the north. Armed groups are increasingly besieging towns, impeding humanitarian access, while poverty engulfs half the country. For 2024, Mali faces severe challenges. Food insecurity is expected to rise as more cities face sieges or blockades. Already, 200,000 children are at risk of death without humanitarian aid. The departure of international peacekeepers and escalating violence will likely obstruct aid delivery and vital services, especially in northern and central Mali. Furthermore, the conflict between the government, armed groups, and Tuareg opposition is poised to escalate, potentially causing significant civilian harm. The International Rescue Committee, IRC, has been providing essential assistance in Mali since 2012, aiding over 2 million people displaced by conflict and facing food shortages. The IRC's efforts span health, nutrition, economic recovery, education, water, sanitation, hygiene, protection, and governance, with a focus on the Menaka, Gao, Douentza, Mopti, and Nara regions. 5. Myanmar, Burma. Escalating conflict and humanitarian needs. Myanmar, also known as Burma, is a Southeast Asian country with a complex history of ethnic diversity and political upheaval. Since the military coup in 2021, the conflict has significantly worsened. By October 2023, 3 major armed groups resumed clashes with the government, straining military forces and increasing civilian harm. The country now sees 18.6 million people in need of humanitarian assistance, a staggering increase from pre-coup levels. The conflict has forced over 335,000 people to flee their homes, since the latest escalation, leading to over 2 million displaced persons nationwide. The situation has rapidly deteriorated, severely impacting civilians and their access to basic services and humanitarian aid. Additionally, Myanmar's exposure to climate change heightens the risk of natural disasters like cyclones. Predictions for 2024 in Myanmar are grim. Civilians are expected to bear the brunt of the intensifying conflict and military pressure. Economic challenges, climate shocks, and impaired public services will further escalate humanitarian needs. Moreover, severe constraints on aid access are likely to continue, hindering the provision of assistance to vulnerable communities. The IRC's involvement in Myanmar dates back to 2008, focusing on delivering health, protection, water, sanitation, hygiene services, and shelter programs to displaced, crisis-affected, and vulnerable communities. The IRC's current programming in Myanmar is intensively humanitarian, aiming to reach people affected by the national crisis and the escalating conflict spreading across the country. 4. Burkina Faso, a nation under siege. Burkina Faso, a landlocked country in West Africa, is experiencing a severe crisis marked by escalating violence and political instability. The country's military struggles to contain armed groups, including Islamic State in the Greater Sahara, ISGS, and Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin, JNIM, resulting in about half of the nation falling outside government control. These groups are blockading cities and towns, cutting off access to basic goods and services. The predictions for 2024 in Burkina Faso are dire. The increasing besiegement of towns by armed groups will likely escalate humanitarian needs. The country faces risks of growing violence and weak harvests due to poor rains in 2023, worsening the food insecurity crisis. The IRC's role in Burkina Faso involves implementing life-saving interventions and emergency assistance in health, nutrition, safety, education, and economic recovery, with a focus on collaborating with local, women-led organizations. 3. South Sudan, a country at a crossroads. South Sudan, the world's youngest nation, gained independence from Sudan in 2011. Despite this milestone, the country has faced persistent insecurity. Heading into 2024, the conflict in neighboring Sudan threatens to destabilize South Sudan's fragile economy and exacerbate political tensions. Economic crises and increased flooding are impacting the population's ability to secure food. Currently, 9 million people in South Sudan, or 72% of the population, need humanitarian assistance. For 2024, the tensions surrounding South Sudan's first presidential election could disrupt social and political cohesion, particularly with the recent surge in violent clashes in the north. The ongoing flooding could further impact food production and displace thousands. The IRC in South Sudan, with over 900 staff, provides health, nutrition, environmental health, protection, and economic recovery services, partnering with authorities and local organizations. 2. Occupied Palestinian Territory, OPT, an escalating humanitarian crisis. In the OPT, particularly Gaza, the humanitarian situation has reached a critical point. Gaza entered 2024 as one of the deadliest places for civilians globally, suffering from the consequences of conflict between Israel and Hamas. Following a ground incursion and rocket barrage by Hamas on southern Israel in October 2023, Israeli forces responded with airstrikes and ground operations, leading to widespread destruction and displacement. As of the report's publication, over 18,000 people in Gaza have been killed. A temporary truce was achieved in late November 2023, but fighting is expected to continue into early 2024. Predictions for 2024 indicate that the airstrikes and fighting within Gaza will continue to have a devastating impact on civilians. The destruction of health, water, and sanitation infrastructure has pushed Gaza's healthcare system to the brink of collapse. People will struggle to recover and rebuild long after the fighting ends, and escalating violence in the West Bank and tensions on Israel's border with Lebanon will drive further humanitarian needs. The IRC is actively providing aid in the OPT, delivering supplies and specialized health services, water and sanitation, child and women's protection, and psychosocial interventions in Gaza. The IRC's response in the region is informed by its global experience and presence in Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, Yemen, and Libya, where it helped 6.3 million people in 2022. 1. Sudan. At the edge of collapse, the top crisis on the 2024 Emergency Watchlist. Sudan, a country in Northeast Africa with a complex history of civil conflicts and political upheavals, now finds itself at the precipice of collapse. The ongoing war between the Sudanese armed forces and rapid support forces has escalated the humanitarian crisis, propelling Sudan to the top of the 2024 Emergency Watchlist. In less than a year, this conflict has more than doubled the number of people in need of humanitarian support. In the Darfur region, known for its prolonged conflict since 2003, human rights groups report mass killings and forced displacements along ethnic lines. The crisis in Darfur, coupled with the broader national conflict, is expected to deteriorate dramatically through 2024. Millions are predicted to face severe food shortages and will struggle to access critical health services. The predictions for Sudan in 2024 are alarming. While the fighting has been most intense in Khartoum and Darfur, it is spreading to other parts of the country, involving an increasing number of armed groups. The conflict shows limited prospects for resolution. Sudan's healthcare system, crippled by the conflict, may continue to struggle with outbreaks of measles and cholera. Economically, Sudan is in a dire situation, with nearly half of its population unemployed amidst hyperinflation and shortages of essential goods. The conflict has led to extreme levels of displacement, both internally and externally, with 6.6 million people displaced, affecting the entire region. In response to these overwhelming challenges, the International Rescue Committee, IRC, has adapted and scaled up its programs in Sudan. The IRC's focus is on addressing the emergency needs of internally displaced people and providing integrated protection services, especially for women and children, including survivors of gender-based violence. The IRC has introduced new responses such as multi-purpose cash assistance and water, sanitation and hygiene services, and plans to expand its presence in locations like Red Sea State and Darfur to address gaps in humanitarian aid. In the 2024 Emergency Watchlist described, there are several African countries included, specifically the Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, Ethiopia, Niger, Mali, Somalia, South Sudan, and Sudan. This highlights the significant challenges and humanitarian crises facing parts of the African continent. What should Africans do? For African nations and communities affected by these crises, the key actions include 1. Strengthening regional cooperation and partnerships to address the root causes of conflicts and instability. 2. Enhancing resilience against climate change impacts by adopting sustainable agricultural practices and investing in climate adaptation measures. 3. Prioritizing healthcare systems to manage and prevent outbreaks of diseases and to provide necessary care in conflict zones. 4. Encouraging local and regional peace-building efforts and dialogues to resolve conflicts. 5. Promoting economic development initiatives to alleviate poverty and improve living standards. Role of the African Union and other African nations. The African Union, AU, alongside other African nations, plays a crucial role in these matters. They can 1. Facilitate diplomatic efforts and conflict resolution to address and prevent violence and instability. 2. Coordinate humanitarian assistance and ensure it reaches the most affected populations. 3. Mobilize resources for development projects to improve infrastructure, education, and healthcare. 4. Promote policies that encourage good governance, human rights, and rule of law. 5. Enhance regional security initiatives to combat terrorism and insurgencies. Role of the global Black community. The global Black community can support these efforts through 1. Advocacy and raising awareness about the crises in these African countries. 2. Supporting humanitarian aid organizations like the IRC with donations and volunteer efforts. 3. Engaging in cultural and educational exchanges to better understand and address the underlying issues. 4. Lobbying for international assistance and intervention where necessary. 5. Fostering a global network of support for African development and peace initiatives. The solution to these crises requires a multifaceted approach. 1. International cooperation, Countries, NGOs, and international bodies like the UN and AU must collaborate to provide humanitarian aid, facilitate peace talks, and support development initiatives. 2. Local empowerment, empowering local communities and governments to lead their development and peace-building efforts is crucial for sustainable solutions. 3. Economic development. Investing in economic development to address poverty, unemployment, and inequality is vital. 4. Climate action. Addressing climate change impacts through sustainable practices and resilience. Building is essential, especially in areas prone to drought and natural disasters. 5. Healthcare systems. Strengthening. Building robust healthcare systems to manage disease outbreaks and provide essential services in conflict zones. The role of organizations like the IRC is critical in these efforts. They provide emergency aid, healthcare, education, and economic recovery support. By supporting and collaborating with such organizations, both locally and internationally, there is a pathway to alleviating the humanitarian crises in these regions.